Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting. We will begin. We'll call the meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. This meeting is being recorded. All participants are in listen-only mode initially. If you wish to ask a question, you can enter it in the chat box or the question pane, or raise your hand and you can be called on to ask your question when we open for questions. Just a moment. Let me open my document here. All right, so we'll start the meeting talking about the COVID-19 situation. No, there's been lots of announcements from the state, but there's no major changes to the current status of the town's response, with the exception of some items that we need to address how we're going to handle in the coming months with the current timelines and stay orders that are in place. So the specifics at this time that we need to address is the annual town meeting, the annual town election, and almost anything goes. So as far as the annual town meeting and annual election, those dates obviously are coming up soon, and we're still waiting on confirmations around printing timelines and things like that, but trying to hold them while we're in the current state is going to be a challenge. So I know we talked about this briefly in our last meeting, but my recommendation would be to delay those to allow us to hopefully get a few things in order, and ideally for this COVID-19 situation to hopefully be on the decline and everything improving before we have to have that meeting where we're gathering people. My thoughts were to move it to mid-June or so, which is about as far as we can go right now. And then if we have to do anything further, there would have to be legislation at that time to make further changes. But that's my thoughts at the moment. I don't know what the rest of the board's thoughts are.
I'm in agreement, Jake. I think we should move it and wait further instructions from the state. If I read the paperwork correctly, we get until June 30th, and June 30th is the drop dead date. So somewhere mid-June, I guess, would work.
That's my understanding as well, and it sounds like based on our latest review of the applicable law and current emergency orders, that if I understood correctly, Brian, the board, since the meeting has not yet been posted, can push that date just solely by a vote of the board.
So yes, we were originally looking at a law that is used, Chapter 39, Section 10A, where the town moderator, in consultation with the emergency management director, the Board of Selectmen, town clerk, can declare an emergency situation where the town meeting can be pushed out 30 days. The challenge, or the one challenge that comes with that, is that it's only good for 30 days. So if you had to extend beyond that initial 30-day posting, you would have to issue it again. And all of that gets recorded with the Attorney General's office. Because we have not announced the meeting yet, I think we can actually use MGL Chapter 39, Section 9, and Town Clerk Newton's on, so maybe we could ask for his thoughts as well. And that says that the Board of Selectmen can delay as long as it's before June 30th, and you haven't issued that yet. So I don't know if you want me to try to unmute Mr. Newton to see if he can be part of the conversation.
Yes, please.
That works. Mr. Newton?
Hi there.
There we go.
All right, glad we're working. So, with the information that I have from the Secretary of State's office, they have said that it is actually two things. It's okay for me to have printed up the ballots with the original date, the normal date that we would have, which we know that, right? Because that's our bylaw. So I've already ordered the ballots to be printed with that date, but the law allows us to use those ballots on whatever date we hold the meeting. Moreover, we are also allowed to start once, you say when the meeting is, and the earlier the better. We're allowed, or I'm allowed to then begin the process of sending out absentee or early voting ballots to people that want them. And of course, the more time you give them, the better, hopefully, the responses that we'll get, that we'll be able to send out.
Okay, well, and I want to talk about the elections as well, but I was, first we were talking about more about the annual town meeting and whether or not we can just postpone that with a board vote, or if we need to exercise the other MGL section with the moderator. And so based on, I think we're looking at MGL Chapter 39, Section 9, it sounds like the Board of Selectmen has the authority to reschedule the town meeting as long as it's prior to June 30th and the meeting has not yet been posted. I don't know if you
Yes.
have it. Okay.
Yep, I agree with that. Yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, we typically do one posting for your election, which ties into what Mr. Newton's talking about. So we post the election warrant at the same time that we're posting the town meeting warrant. We could choose to separate them this time if you wanted to and do two separate postings, and then the two things are no longer tied together, other than the bylaw that we have suggests that the two things should happen in a particular sequence. Or you could keep them the way you always have and keep them all into the same warrant. It's a preference choice from the three of you.
Guess my
I would also say that when you call both of those together on the same warrant, that they have to be within 30 days of each other. So you can, if you wanted to spread it out even further, you can do that.
Agreed.
And if my memory serves, our bylaw currently states that the annual town meeting will be on the first Wednesday, and the annual town election will be the Monday following. Does that sound correct?
Yes.
In May? Yeah. So in the spirit of that, even if we move to June for both, we should try to hold one the week prior to the other. Keep the same order.
That was council's recommendation, yes.
I'd be in favor of keeping them as, keeping as many things as normal as possible, even though it's not normal right now. So, I'd recommend we put them on, we decide now what we'd like to move both those dates to. We exercise the ones we can exercise, and then work with the other town officials to move the rest and plan them accordingly. My thoughts would be just to throw a date out there of Wednesday, June 17th for the annual town meeting, and then Monday, June 20th. Well, we could go out further, I guess. What are your thoughts? Do you want to go to the final week, or do you want to do it sooner?
Is that to the board?
Yes, that's to you.
Okay.
I'm fine with either.
Yeah, I'm fine. June 17th for the annual. Okay,
Yeah, and June 22nd recommended for the annual town election.
okay.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense? Dick, do you have any thoughts? Does that sound okay to you?
No, that sounds fine.
Yep, that's absolutely fine. Yep.
Okay. All right, well, let me make a motion that we move our annual town meeting for 2020 to June 17th at 7 p.m. at the Irving Elementary School. At this point, I don't expect a change in venue, and we'll address that later if needed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now, as far as the town election, it's a different set of requirements around how that gets officially moved, correct?
Yes, in some ways. I mean, you can still vote to move it if you. I believe the same general law that the legislature passed allows you to move the town election as well.
Oh, yeah, it does.
But
Right,
if you,
right. I'm confusing the
Right.
other section with the moderator. This is also the board. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the election, there's a few other things. Obviously, we want to promote absentee or early voting to reduce the amount of people who are coming to vote. I know, Dick, you had asked about reducing hours. I think you said the minimum hours we must hold the election open, or the ballots open, is for, or the polls, I'm sorry, for 4 hours. Is that correct?
that is correct. 4 hours.
And then another thought that had been around was about potentially maybe moving the location to an area that has more space so that we could spread people out if we, are still in a situation where social distancing is a key.
Yeah, but you can't just move location for voting. Okay. If you move the location of voting, you need to send notice to every registered voter in town. And then when you change it back, you got to do it again.
And nothing in this current act allows for that to be done
Not that I
differently
read,
at
no,
this
sir.
time?
Yeah, not that I've read. No.
What do you
So Dick,
think, gentlemen?
Dick, what are the hours? Is it?
Well, 4 hours is the minimum. I was suggesting, 12 to 4 or 11 to 3, something like that. With the idea that it's an added incentive for people to vote using early voting. And plus the fact that, if there's going to be still an issue with the virus that, hanging in there and whatever, that would tend to keep people home. And so shortening it up kind of made sense.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, in regards to people doing absentee ballots, do they have to give a reason for requesting absentee ballots? I thought usually it was if they were sick or out of state, but I thought I read in the paperwork that this was considered a situation where absentee ballot worked for anyone.
Yeah, actually, I mean, the law that was passed by the legislature is allowing for people to do either or, the absentee or the early voting, whichever methodology they want to use.
Okay.
And they're both done through the mail. Doesn't,
Yep. So I guess the only other thing I'd add to that is that then if that's the case, then you may get deluged with requests. And do you need some help in your office to do that in the mailing process, or are you okay?
I think I'll be okay. If I need a little bit of help, I'll, ask Betsy or if she's coming in at that point or not. I'll figure it out one way or the other.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a comment from Jackie asking if the around town would be a good venue for the notification for an election venue change if that was required.
No, I can't do that. It has to be, according to MGL, I have to do a mailing.
Okay.
How far in advance would you have to do that if we were doing a move? Obviously,
I
more
don't
is
remember
better,
that piece.
Okay.
I suspect it's probably 30 days, but I'd have to read it. I haven't read it for a while.
My only thought is rather than maybe going through that action at this point, we kind of see how the events unfold as we go forward and get closer. And then if we feel there's a strong driver to make another change, we can always make an additional change at that point.
Sure.
In terms of hours, especially where, we can get the word out right away about, absentee and early voting. And, I have less concerns about shortening the time for everyone's safety, but I do think we should probably find a way to kind of overlap traditional work schedules. There are plenty of people who are essential who are still working. So maybe moving that to like 3 to 7 or something that might allow people to get home in time and get here.
Sure. Yeah,
If that would work.
Mike,
that would work.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think we just need to double check. I think the latest that we can begin polling is noon.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. I forgot that part.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
This is Mariah. Can I make a comment?
Yes.
So my thought was shortening the hours, that's actually going to condense the amount of people who are going to be there at once. It seems to me like you would want to actually keep a longer number of hours and, have people spread out more.
Yep. I understand what you're saying, but I'm thinking that, with the likelihood of people being able to do the early voting, as well as the fact that typically a ballot that doesn't have a selectman's race on it, the turnout is very low to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that would be a concern, but
Okay.
just going by statistics.
What is the normal hours that we hold?
Normally on a town election, it's 10 a.m. till 8 at night.
Can I talk?
Yes, go ahead, Jackie. That's Jackie, right?
Yeah, I'm just concerned. We do have a race for treasurer on this ballot, and they are campaigning. So my concern is if we shorten the hours too much, then the people that are working won't have a time to go in and vote. And also, I have a question. If you do early voting or you do absentee, don't you have to appear in person?
No, you can do it through the mail.
So people send a request for early voting and for absentee.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think there's good points about, raised about the hours, and I didn't realize I had to start at noon, and that condensing may have the opposite effect. I know traditionally, we don't have a large turnout, especially if there's not a selectman's race, but I think that spreading out the attendance would probably be safer at this point than having it condensed in a smaller time frame. And I do, as someone who's not normally here between 10 and 6 because I'm at work, I do have that same concern about, accessibility. I also hope that we get most people to choose to do early voting instead, but I don't know. I'm leaning towards maybe we do something like 12 to 7. I was tempted to say 12 to 6, but I feel like it'd be a little early. I don't know what does everyone else think.
12 to 7 works for me.
It's good for me also.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
let's do
Just,
that.
yeah, obviously, I'll do whatever you guys decide, but just one extra thing to think about is we've been told, or I've been told, via the Secretary of State's office, that we can use tools in our disposal to encourage people to vote absentee or early voting by doing a reverse 911. We could put something in the around town. We could actually put an application in the around town. So all they gotta do is fill it out and mail it in. Just 2 cents.
I think we should do both. I mean, I think we should do as much outreach as possible about early voting and absentee voting, especially in the current climate, and then, but also be accessible for those that may not be able to make that happen.
Yep. Okay.
And and realistically, it's a dynamic environment. We may very well be talking about this again in a few weeks and a month and making further adjustments. So to me, this is our first adjustment. Hopefully it's the last, but I wouldn't count on it. So I guess I'd make a motion that we move the annual town election to June 22nd with the, is polling hours the right term, Dick?
Yes.
With polling hours from noon to 7 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Who was the second?
I think Pete beat
Pete
Bill to the buzzer. The third item that is coming up that is currently impacted is the Almost Anything Goes. We have, I believe that's traditionally starts the week of May 1st. And so people start putting things out within a couple of weeks here. So I think with the current orders in place and such, to assume that we'll be able to proceed with that and, safely, and also with the assistance of the sheriff's office and others that we're traditionally have help with it is at best in question. So I think we have a couple different options. We could postpone it. We could potentially look at doing a drop-off model rather than a pickup model, where we put roll-off dumpsters in a couple locations maybe, and maybe have them manned with equipment to help move large bulky items to get them into them, and then allow people to come down and drop off. Or we could look into having a different third party take care of the whole process, such as normal waste management is done, through a contractor. I think the last item might be favorable in terms of a business that is maybe more well equipped to handle waste in the current state and with the health concerns, but I don't think that that's something we can do quickly, and I don't know their availability in the current climate, right? So that may take a bit longer to implement a change of that sort. And I don't know what you gentlemen think of those, or other ideas. That those are just the ones that I've heard or come up with.
I've tried to kind of wrap my head around it, but all I can come up with the best idea being to postpone it this year and do it next year. It just, when I think about trying to move the date, we get further and further into holidays and the fall, and it seems like we're just in chaos for just a long period of time. So I think it's more reasonable, at least for me, to cancel Anything Goes and do it next year, 2022.
That's probably going to be our best option, I'm thinking.
I'm glad you guys said it. No.
Well, the other option would be the roll-offs, but then you're going to have issues of, I don't know how many people are going to be able to get their stuff
Right.
to the dumpster.
Right.
If it's known further in advance, then maybe, some people make money on the side and do that. But like Bill had said, we're in a tight window right now.
Right.
And I don't foresee the sheriff's department coming out with what's going on. So I agree with Bill. Probably our best option is to postpone it.
I know I believe we have Glenn on the line if you have any questions for him as well, but we don't have I know we've reached out, but we don't have an answer from the sheriff's department yet. I expect at the very least they wouldn't be doing it in the timeline that we had originally planned. And the same with our contractor who assists. We don't have a response yet on whether they're still able to continue with the timeline, but I guess I'm maybe not quite ready to go that far. Maybe I like it that, I don't know, maybe I'm so used to having it in the short time I've been here, but I was thinking more of maybe delaying it and not setting a date necessarily, but delaying it and looking at, where are we in 30 to 60 days, and then seeing if, at that point we're talking late May, and depending on how everything has evolved, are we able to project that things will be more normal by, maybe late summer? I was thinking of maybe August, before school starts or something. Or if not, then maybe it's time to decide to postpone it, or cancel it for the year. And then that would also give us time to talk with, the sheriff's department and other agencies about, what can they do and what do they think in the climate is going to be their availability. And then also we could look at a third party and see if there's a waste company, either our current contractor or someone else who could take on the entire process, as part of their services. And what does that look like? And does that make sense? Because they're more equipped to handle it safely. So it may be delaying the same decision realistically of canceling, but it just would give us a little more time to try to see if there's other options. I don't know. I mean, I'm open to a motion for whatever direction we want to go. But I just feel like we do need to make some kind of definitive decision tonight, because we've got to advise people that they shouldn't start piling on their curb next week or the weekend after. It's getting to be that close. So
I was just going
Right.
to say, I've been starting to get the calls and the emails from residents and staff who are wondering.
right.
I didn't hear that, Brian.
I was just, to Jake's point, I was letting you all know that the calls are already starting to come in from residents and staff, obviously looking for direction on this issue. So it's true that we do need to put out a timely, informative communication to folks.
The calls that have come in, any people leaning any way from the calls that you've received?
Some people would like to take advantage of the fact that they've been sent home and would like to start spring cleaning now, and put things curbside. And I had to encourage them not to do that because we weren't ready to say for sure whether or not we could continue on schedule. I have communicated to folks that there's a good chance that we may have to delay because of all the health concerns that we have and the labor concerns that we have.
Mhm.
And people seem to understand it once you explain what the constraints are. But I don't know that the average property owner is aware of all the constraints that go into this. Logistically, it is a lot to put together to make sure it all happens the way it's supposed to. And without confirmation that we'd have access to the sheriff's office, and without knowing what other enforcement orders are going to come from the state and federal government, I don't know that we can promise the residents to stay on schedule. So I think they do understand once we communicate it to them.
Well, I guess I still feel the same way. I think we should postpone it. I mean, it's not something that I take any joy in wanting to do. I know in our household we had worked pretty hard throughout the fall and even since January to get ready for this event. But, you know, the governor's order is that pretty much everything is shut down during this whole period except for pharmacies and you know, hospitals and those essential public safety areas that are important for people's survival and everyday survival. So I don't see how everything day reaches that need. So and you know, things could be hectic enough, but I think we, rather than having all these different options that we have to make decision after decision every couple of weeks, it might be easier to just say no to some of them and move on and just deal with the ones that we absolutely have to. So I'll make a motion that on anything goes day, we cancel till next year.
That's a tough
I'll
one.
second it. Last time.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, begrudgingly. I agree. This is not an easy decision, and it's a very uncertain time. And I think that you're right, Bill, that there's a lot of things that we'll continue to have to address. So it's probably right to take longer term action on some of them. So thank you. That being said, I think it's prudent to take this time, you know, as we can, to look at how do we do this next year, and with this situation in mind, how do we be safer about this process? So we can spend this time trying to maybe establish a better process or a safer way to do this with, you know, for next year.
Agreed.
Okay. Well, time flew by on that stuff. So, I saw, Jackie, I saw your note about the around town and putting a stuffer in there about the changes for almost anything goes. So, yes, we would appreciate that, and I think we'll be able to put something together in the next couple of days to get in there for the April issue. And we'll obviously put out the message in all of the different media outlets and avenues that we can. All right, well, that wraps up, unless anyone else had anything else around COVID-19. I will move on to our joint meeting since it is after 7. Do we have the FinCom on?
Ben, Charlie, and Deb with us.
Okay, excellent. So what I will do is I will call the joint meeting with the Finance Committee to order at 7:05 p.m. and we'll let you get them all, their audio lines opened up. Hi, Ben.
How y'all doing?
Good.
I was wondering if you guys are going to keep muting me. I had stuff to say.
Just another Monday night at the office, right?
Sounds like 3 words.
Okay, so I've made Deb and Ben on as panelists, so you can mute and unmute yourself. And then Charlie, you're on as audio, but you can also unmute yourself when you are ready to do.
Okay, well, if we are ready to go, let's dive into review of the FY 2021 budget first. Brian, if you would bring that up. Maybe just a little bigger though.
Well, now you're asking for a lot. There we go.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Okay, and I'm still working on a revised version of your budget book that I will get out to all of you. Here's your revised summary with all of the numbers that you approved last week. The big changes were you looked at the education budget with a 2.5% increase on the Irving Elementary School in comparison to what the school department's request was of 3.4, and you went to support their request. So that has been factored into the education number. The public safety number has been adjusted to 18,000 that we discussed that would allow the possibility of expanding the Orange ambulance contract to do full town service. Otherwise, all of the other adjustments are the same. And then the one thing I have not gotten back to is to work with Jackie and the assessors just to have a conversation about new growth. So at this point, new growth is still estimated to be 0 at this point.
I know I've brought it up before, but this also is a decrease in the deposit into capital stabilization based on primarily running out of money, I guess, for lack of a more eloquent way to say it. We're depleting most of our raise and appropriate and our free cash in the things that we're trying to do in the regular operating budget this year. So it doesn't leave as much to put there. And, obviously part of that is making the library payments to stabilization, which we had committed to last year. So that's a good chunk there as well. Any questions or concerns or anything around the general summary here?
No surprises.
No, I think it's what I expected.
Okay. Would you like me to move on to the warrant?
Just a second. Bill, did you have something? I thought I heard you there for a second.
I was just going to ask on the payback to the library. Was last year the first payment, or we didn't make the payment last year? So how many payments do we have to make in order to rectify the payback?
So a couple things, and Brian can fill in what I missed, but we took the draw last year, as far as I recall. So this
Okay.
would be the first payback payment.
Okay. Okay.
I believe it was 5 years.
Correct.
And there may or may not be a change to what that final payment is. I know we were lucky to be able to secure the solar at a much lower price than originally anticipated when we allocated the extra funding.
Yep.
So that is another pool of money we might use to help repay that back a little bit quicker, because that's sitting there unspent, right? So as we close out the project sometime the end of this year, or next fiscal year, probably when we close out everything and make sure everything's all tied up, we could probably transfer whatever's left of that article back into stabilization to help accelerate that payment.
Okay. That answers my question. Thank
The
you.
only other thing I would add is we have 2 more payments coming from MBLC. So we'll have that approximate $1 million to also help as well.
Oh, okay.
I think that-
When are those payments coming, Brian? Do you know?
The next one is scheduled to, you have to meet the threshold of having a certificate of occupancy, which we have secured, and you have to wait for the new fiscal year. So I know Barbara has already prepared the application, and that will go in. So we're expecting it in the first few weeks of July.
Okay.
So that will be about $540,000 should be coming in. And so we'll have that money that we will bring to town at some point, and we will have to transfer that into stabilization.
Yep.
And the next one is supposed to happen the following year, on the next July 1. So July 1 of 2021, we
Yep.
should that final payment. We can't bank on it. I've heard that in some cases, there's a cleanup of the bill and the MBLC is looking to pay off some of the projects that they've committed to and they have money and they'll sort of push through that last payment. Could we be that lucky? But I don't think we should count on it. We may get that, or we will have to wait till next July. Either way, far off.
Okay. Well, yeah, I would like to say I'd be clearly in favor of when those funds arrive that they go directly to paying back the debt that we assumed for the other half of the library. So I think the quicker we get rid of that, and Jake would, I assume, would probably agree that the sooner we get rid of that debt, it'll make it easier for our capital budget and the work that we're trying to do going forward. So.
Agreed. Mechanically, though, we may need to do it at a special town meeting. So as soon as that money comes in, we can make the board income aware.
Yep.
And if we have enough reasons to call a special town meeting, we could do that transaction at that meeting.
Agreed.
Mhm.
Oh, Jake, I think you're muted.
There, is that better?
Now I can hear you.
It was a great monologue you didn't hear.
I kept going. I feel like something should be happening, and I saw your mouth, but nothing else.
Technology. So I was just asking if there's any other questions on this, and I think there was also a comment from the audience about the potential for some $100,000 of leads money too. Should we get the leads on the library, which is another item that could help pay back that debt. So there's a bunch of different sources to help accelerate or at least keep with our 5-year timeline on that payback.
Correct.
Anything else on the budget summary?
Okay.
It's a tight budget. There's not a lot left at the bottom there. So, but I think it gets a lot done. So, all right, let's move on to the annual town meeting warrant.
So now I can update this with a new date. So we will get these all updated.
Is this a redlined copy, Brian?
This is a red line copy. So the only thing that we backed out of here were the dates. And how you made decisions tonight. So I will make that adjustment for next week. So there were no changes to any of the first 4 articles. You had already reviewed those at previous meetings, no changes. Last week, you had reviewed a revised copy of this new Article 5, and you accepted that, so that has been finalized. The only change that we had made was it's a 2/3 vote on this as opposed to that majority. As we discussed before, there were 2 changes made to the budget last week. You all agreed to add $18,000 to the ambulance line item. So that adjusted the overall public safety budget by that $18,000. So that change is now reflected here and in that grand total. Article 7 has not changed at all from the last time you reviewed it. In terms of Article 8, this is where you accepted the recommendation from the school committee and the request to have $3,288,903 as their operating budget. So this article has now been updated to reflect that. No changes to Article 9 or Article 10. Article 11 and Article 12, you reviewed some revised versions of these articles last week and accepted those, so those have been finalized. Article 13 is your continuing appropriations, and so there's no changes here. So last week, as we move into the capital budgets, you discussed wanting to hold the server maintenance network upgrade line item out of the capital for 2021 and to make it a free cash appropriation so that depending on the timing of town meeting, it could maybe happen earlier than July 1. Now that you scheduled it for June 17th, I don't know how relevant that now feels, but I created the article as you asked. The only other change that we added to this, and this was an internal conversation that we were going to recommend, we also pulled the carpet replacement project into a current article for the school, only because that takes about a 3 to 4 week lead time to do the procurement on that, and we would want to do the work in July. And now that town meeting is being postponed, but again, now that town meeting is going to be mid-June, I don't know how relevant this all is, but that's for your review. And therefore 14 has now been revised with those deletions.
Well, I guess let's pause there. What's the thoughts? I mean, at least as being part of the server maintenance network upgrade recommendation, I feel less like that's a lot less relevant for 13 days now than it was when it was 55 days before. What I don't know about the carpet. Again, it's about 2 weeks, so maybe that helps with the procurement to try to get it done still in July. But I mean, I guess you're going to be a big part of that as the procurement officer, Brian. Is that do you think that's meaningful, or at this point should we just consolidate those back down to one article?
As of right now, with only 2 weeks, it's not going to do much for me. By the time I'm done issuing, it's going to take me at least 4 weeks to do the procurement. So at this point, I won't be done with the procurement until middle of July at this point. So at this point, it wouldn't be all that helpful. So I don't think it's necessary anymore from that standpoint. So the server question would only be whether or not you need to expend those funds in those last 2 weeks.
I don't think that would be critical or significant value. So I guess I'd recommend we just consolidate that back and have only one Article 14 instead of 2.
Agreed.
Okay.
I agree with it.
Squish
So
them back together.
I will merge and renumber. Just want to point out, I started to attribute the funding sources as we discussed last week. So because it was going to be a current year, this was sourced out of free cash, whereas the rest were a raise and appropriate. So I'll put the two back together, and we're going to have a combined
Okay.
an appropriate and free cash transfer article as our two sources here.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I will make that adjustment for next week. Again, I just want to note that nothing dollar-wise changed. We just broke them into two. So this 163 and this 446 put back together equals your original 609. So there was no change. It was just a formatting and presentation. There was no change to Articles 15 or 16. Those were the wastewater and water capital projects. There was no change to Article 17, which is the annual limits. Oh, I found one thing. I needed to change that to 2021. Look at that. Article 17. But there was no other substantive changes there. 17, 20, 21. Don't like that change. Last week, Chairman, that I had not put in the two articles for those capital fund transfers that we've been tracking on our budget summary. So those have been added. So you have one into the capital stabilization fund of 250,000. And then you have, which is the repayment into the general stabilization account of 273,000. And this I sourced, one was the balance of what was available in free cash, and the other amount was going to be raised and appropriated. Any questions or concerns on those two?
Is that more than a majority vote because it's capital or not because it's going in at an annual?
It's a majority in, it's a 2/3 out. Yep.
Okay.
Though if I'm wrong about that, Mr. Newton can unmute himself and he can correct me. So assuming you're fine with those two, I will finalize those for next week. There were no changes to the amended bylaw for the EV charging stations for the revolving accounts. There were no changes to the proposed town meeting quorum bylaw change. There was no change to the rescinding of the original town meeting and election warrant posting order. And then there was also no change to the new version that was proposed by the town clerk. No change to the license fees and service charges that was proposed. And the only changes that we made last week to the driveway and curb cuts bylaw that we're proposing, that in section 1, we added that the appeals were going to go to the Board of Selectmen. That was moved from a lower section. And
Yep.
it was down right here, enforcement. We changed number 4 so that the enforcement is now the building inspector, zoning enforcement officer, or designee. And that was a suggestion from council. So the permitting function will still fall on the highway superintendent or designee, but the actual enforcement and the ability to issue a penalty will come from the building inspector who has those enforcement authorities. And then you all had a good discussion about what the initial fine and the fine every day after would be. And so my notes had that you agreed that $100 would be the fine on the 61st day. And then it would be $10 every day after. So I made those adjustments. And then there was no change to the structured tax agreement, except I will have to renumber that as well. And that was all of the changes to the annual town meeting warrant.
So a couple comments or questions. One, I think, if I'm not mistaken, FinCom wanted to wait until it was kind of at this stage to make a overall recommendation of all the articles, because we don't have recommends
That's
on
correct.
those. Okay. And then one other thing I wanted to bring up, and we do have a little bit more time now to think about this if we wanted to. Now that we have our step and grade system in place, we know we talked a little bit about elected official compensation, where they were also, more of a traditional employee in terms of their office time and how that fits in. It brought up some concerns or thoughts about how do we change that. And I'll use this year as an example. If we have a treasurer who is newly elected rather than the incumbent, based on our wage study, that rate would drop back down to a step 1. But being there's no way to change that compensation after the election, it probably can't. But going forward, we should probably look at how do we kind of reorganize our election and our meeting to allow that to happen so that it can follow our process. And so we don't necessarily have to put it on and decide it for the annual, but what I was thinking of is maybe changing our annual town meeting and elections bylaw. I believe it's a bylaw to allow the election to occur before the annual town meeting. And I know we flip-flop back and forth a few times since I've been here even. And I was a proponent of it because I felt the elected official, the potentially outgoing elected official who generated the budgets should sit at the table at the meeting and speak to why. So my thoughts were of moving to a model where we do the election before the annual town meeting, but we don't have the newly elected official take office until maybe July 1 or sometime later. They don't have to take office right away. And maybe not within the bylaw, but the other thing that I think is important is finding a way to do some sort of continuity approach. So how do we do a handoff between those two, the incoming and outgoing officials, right? So maybe there's a week, or maybe there's a way we can incorporate that into our plan as well. But I want to put it out there. I don't know if we're all feel in agreement and ready to draft a change to put on the annual, but it's something to think about doing probably sooner than later, even if it's at a future special.
I like that idea, Jake. I think I was never totally fond of moving the election past the annual town election. So again, as you said, I don't see any reason why the elected official can't start, a preset date after the election. Does the same thing. To me, it would put everything back in balance. And I think it might be too soon for the annual, but definitely for the special that will probably come up after the annual at some point.
Mr. Newton's raising his hand if you'd like to hear from him.
Sure.
Yeah, just a concern that I have when you say that you want to hold off installing people into office after the election. I vaguely recall there's a MGL about that. And I think that the way it's worded as soon as they are eligible, qualified, I think the word is qualified for office, they can be sworn in. I don't know if you can override that with a town bylaw.
Well, rather, I mean, I think to Bill's point, and I hadn't asked Brian yet, but I think it's probably prudent to not try to fit it into this warrant. But if you could investigate that further, I'd appreciate it. And I know I did, generally briefly ask council, and the comment was that some other towns do a similar thing. Now, whether or not it's exactly the way I just said it or not, I don't know. But council seemed to indicate that it was probably something we could do. So, but this will give us some time to kind of flesh that out and see what that would look like. But I just wanted to put it out there to get the feedback from the board if it made sense to pursue that.
Okay, and I'll look into that and get back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Newton. Pete, I take it, I saw you nod a little there. You agree with the idea?
I agree.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll look into drafting that, but not for the annual. All right, back to you, Ben. I don't know if there's, the board or the FinCom, if there's any further questions or comments other than a recommendation.
Yeah, what do you think, FinCom? Any questions, any worries, any concerns? Any
No,
motions?
I think we've been over it quite a few times. Everything looks as I expected it to.
Okay.
You all good with it, Charlie?
I didn't catch that, Ben. What was that?
I said, are you all good with it, Charlie?
Yes, I am.
You guys, somebody want to put forth a motion?
I make a motion that the FinCom recommend the annual town meeting warrant.
I second.
Oh, good. Sorry, I jumped the gun. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? FinCom unanimous.
Excellent.
So I will revise for next week for the board's final review.
Yep, and then we can vote on it next week.
Excellent. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, one quick question. Did I see something about a date has already been decided?
Yes, so that discussion began before you arrived and hadn't finished before we started the joint meeting. So We did. We made some decisions tonight to change the annual town election and annual town meeting dates based on the current situation. So we moved the annual town meeting to June 17th at 7 p.m. at the Irving Elementary School.
Okay.
And moved the annual town elections to June 22nd. And the polls will be open from noon to 7, which is a change from historical. Okay. Let's see.
Do you want to go to the reconciliations policy?
Yes. Yes, I was just referring back to my agenda. I've got to get myself a printed copy. It makes it quicker. Yeah, so next was the review of the reconciliation policy draft, the second read. If anyone had any thoughts or comments on their first read?
None.
None.
Did FinCom have a chance to review? Did they have any questions or concerns?
I read it and had no concerns.
I didn't have any concerns.
Okay, we will carry that for one more meeting and then plan to adopt next week unless there's further concerns at that time.
Okay.
Okay.
I believe that pretty much wraps up what we had for the joint meeting.
All I had.
Anything else FinCom has for us?
Nothing that I can think of.
Okay, well, we will plan to adopt the town meeting warrant next week, and we don't expect any further changes, so I don't see a need to have a joint meeting until probably the evening of the annual, unless something comes up before then.
Okay, well, just let us know and we'll be here.
Okay, all right, well, we'll put together a calendar to probably meet at 6 p.m. on the 17th before the annual, assuming there's some business to cover before the meeting jointly, and otherwise we will let you know.
Sounds great. Thanks. Another good process, guys. Everybody stay safe.
Everyone for
Thank you,
working with us
Finance
in this
Committee.
new environment. I'll make a motion that we adjourn the joint meeting and resume the Board of Selectmen meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Just because it's hard to hear the audio, it cuts over everybody, so I just want to make sure we didn't miss any votes. Sounds like it was unanimous. All right,
you all.
thank you, FinCom. We will see you in a
Thank
couple
you.
months.
Thank you.
Sounds great. Stay safe.
Good
You
night.
too.
Okay, continuing down our agenda. I know we have Jackie and I think Mariah's assisting around the PACE item, which I am looking for on the agenda, but I know it's here. But anyway, so let's jump down to that and begin that discussion. And then we can
So,
even if you wish not to. There it is. Clean discussion of adopting property assessed clean energy programs, PACE. There we go. Found it.
so Jackie and I spent some time researching PACE and meeting with a representative of their program, which is through Mass Development, in an effort to kind of learn more about what tools are available to the town when it comes to redevelopment and to our businesses here. And I'm going to let Jackie explain most of it since I don't totally understand the assessing part of it. But I know that from a planning perspective as well as from an assessing perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Jackie, do you want to go ahead and try to explain?
Thank you, Mariah. Thanks. Welcome, Jackie.
So basically, this program, the only part the municipality has to do is we assess a betterment towards the property that's being improved, and then the betterment will forward it on to the paying agent. That's really the only risk, if any, that the town has to take. But it's basically for existing businesses to do energy improvements. And there's a long list of the energy improvements. So it's commercial use that includes nonprofits, apartment units 5 or more, or occupieds included, as well as your industrial uses, Irving Paper Mill, Renovators Supply, that sort of thing. And they work with Mass Development, and they find lenders to help them borrow this money. It has to meet a minimum threshold of $250,000. So it's for big energy improvements. But there's lots of things that you could do. Windows, includes downsizing, insulation, doors, the building envelope, HVAC, central air, mini splits, solar, as long as it's not for resale on the grid. That includes the upgrade of the roof, propane to natural gas, wind, geothermal. It also would include parking lot solar. So by adopting the article that they forwarded a copy that I hope you've seen, that would get us on to be a PACE community. This program was approved in August of 2016. It was enacted, but they hadn't quite gotten it off the ground yet. They were hoping they would be off the ground by the end of the summer, but with what's going on, it might be longer. Any questions?
And I'd just like to add, I think in terms of the redevelopment of the IP mill property, this is particularly valuable. We really need to be able to offer a developer for that property all of the tools that we have available. And I know that there's I think between 11 and 15 other towns who have adopted this, and I know quite a few are towns that I know have similar properties to the IP mill, where they really need to be able to offer developers ways to borrow money that makes sense for projects that they're going to be doing, like Jackie said, with HVAC systems, with working on the building envelope and things like that.
So, I mean, I think I understood and followed, but just to break it down real basic, it sounds like this is some clean energy financing money that's, allocated, and then the repayment is through a property tax bill as opposed to just paying back a financing. Is that correct?
That's correct. What happens is they place a betterment lien on the property, which we then assess them, and then we would collect the monies, and then we'd send it off to the paying agent. So it's kind of a guaranteed payback for the lender because it's gone to a betterment. And, other communities do betterments when they want to do improvements on sidewalks and water and infrastructure and stuff like that in a specific neighborhood.
And I assume, kind of to what both of you were alluding to, this opens up other financing sources that a private entity wouldn't necessarily have access to if we didn't adopt this, correct?
Yes. So it allows them to, so any bank in Massachusetts can become a lender. In some ways, it makes it a more secure risk for them because they know they're going to get their money back because we've got the betterment lien on it. And also it opens up, because they're working with Mass Development, it opens up more venues for lending that they might not know are available. There's no risk to the town. So say somebody defaults on their taxes and, there's tax title, the betterment's still in place, but we're not putting up any money, okay? We're only acting as the agent for the betterment lien. That's where we come in.
Any other questions from the group or the audience?
Jackie, when you say commercial property, does PACE translate down to the citizens of the community? Or is it just?
It's not a residential program, although if you own a 5-unit apartment, and we do have a couple of those in town, we've got a couple that are 5 units, and then of course we have the apartments. They would be eligible, but it's a commercial program and not a residential program.
Okay.
I could think of lots of things that sound PACE eligible if you were trying to rehab a mill building down at an IP.
Exactly, and say we want to help Renovators Supply, reinvent themselves. It's another avenue for that. Or Irving Paper Mill, they've talked about the solar aspect, but maybe they haven't done it. But this would be a venue for them to look into, an avenue for them to maybe get that money lended to them.
Right, and they're also not allowed to, because they're bringing this project to mass development, they won't be approved for a larger loan than the payback of the project will give them. So it's not possible for them to take out a large loan, do a small project, and like pocket money or anything like that. It has to be a project approved by mass development, which will ultimately, outweigh this loan.
They have a very complicated way that they figure the payback for the 20 years, but that's what they do. So she kind of lost Mariah and I both in that. So
Jackie or Mariah, is it predetermined what the cap is of what you can receive or in assistance?
She didn't give us a cap. She gave us a minimum of how you could apply. So your project, the threshold of the project has to be $250,000. So if somebody had a project and they wanted to do windows or solar, they might go in and help them and say, well, you don't quite meet that threshold, but perhaps you want to do something else related to energy. So it brings it under that $250,000 threshold. So they work with them on that, but there was nothing as far as the cap was concerned, because other large property owners, commercial property owners have used this mechanism. So there was no cap on it.
Okay.
So the minimum is 250,000, the size of the project? Okay.
Yep, for permits and fees, application and permit fee, and it's a $250,000 threshold for the project.
So definitely large scale improvements.
Yep. Yep.
And so if we are in favor of or interested in this, we would need to kind of adopt it and be a PACE municipality. Is that basically what?
Yes, she recommended an annual town meeting. There is a town meeting vote that she forwarded to us to work off of. Yep.
Mr. Chairman, actually, the Board of Selectmen by the statute is actually authorized to take a vote. So that's also an option.
Yeah, you could read the resolution into the minutes. That was one of those things. We just weren't sure what Irving could do.
Correct.
I think there's a lot there to digest. I was thinking we'd, take at least a week to review it further and then come back to the item next week, if that works for the rest of the board.
Works for me.
Me also.
Any other questions for Jackie or Mariah around the program?
No, I'm good.
Just a little bit more from me. So obviously the town basically acts as the I guess the collector, right? The payment collector by
Right.
the methodology. Is there any other role the town takes in the process along the way, other than the lien and the obviously the taxing? Is it as you mentioned, if it went to tax title, obviously municipal liens are first according to the hierarchy, and it sounds like PACE would be second to all the mortgage liens. But is there any other overhead or requirements for the town to help manage the program?
No, she said the only thing that we have to do is do the lien, and you would basically put the money in like the escrow account, and then you would forward that money on to the paying agent, which would be a third party, which they were going to have an RFP that was going to go out. This was a couple months ago. They were hoping for a 60-day launch, but now that's all been pushed away. So
The town would basically act as escrow and then pay the financing agent.
right, so they lend them the money. They lend the commercial property owner the money. We'd assess the betterment on the bill. We'd get the money in. We'd set that money aside in an escrow account, and then I'm not sure if it's the tax collector or the treasurer would forward that money on to the paying agent. That's it.
Okay. Well, thank you. It sounds very interesting. I don't know if it's, especially for some of our larger properties.
Right.
So, Mr. Chairman, in the board's packet, you have the presentation that we've been putting on the screen from Mass Development for your review. You also have a complicated sort of logic model here for how that money flows that speaks to what Jackie was talking about. You also have a model of what the resolution is that we would have to have you adopt. And there's obviously some adjustments that we can make to this, but in essence, this is what needs to be voted on and sent to the PACE program at Mass Development for us to participate. Are there other data points or other pieces of information that we can collect for the board for your review?
And it may have been in there. There was a lot of slides to go back through, but the only curiosity I have, it sounds like some of the other states are a little ahead of us in adopting this type of program. Does Mass Development have any data on how much it's been utilized in other areas that have had it longer?
They do. Well, I'd say that Julie, I think, was the one we spoke with, but I'm not sure if we'd get a response before your next meeting, but she did talk about it in a favorable light. Is that what you recalled, Mariah?
Yeah, there are other states that have this in a commercial capacity, but a lot of other states also have it in a residential capacity, which has been very successful. But Massachusetts already has the Mass Save program, which is comparable to it. And so I think we were a little bit slow on the uptake to start the PACE for commercial. But yeah, it sounds like the other states have been successful with it. I'm not sure in terms of numbers what we'd be able to gather, like Jackie said, but I can definitely look. I think there were some included in that slideshow, but I don't know exactly what.
Yeah, there was just some national statistics, and then there was a reflection on New Hampshire. It looked like New Hampshire, Connecticut, and maybe Rhode Island had recently adopted.
Yeah, I think it started in the Midwest and is moving east.
Yes.
Okay.
But we can look for some case study information to share with the board.
I can get some. I'm just curious. Go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
My only concern would be, I think the program is fine. I would just like to hear from our tax office or treasurer's office as to how much work they think is involved in this process, and whether it's something that they would have some concern with.
Yeah, so we did. Oh, go ahead, Jackie.
Well, I can talk. We did talk to Michelle about it because it's really function of the assessor's office and the tax collector's office to place the betterment lien on the property.
Okay.
And then she'd be collecting it and sending it off. And she didn't seem to have any concerns with it.
Okay. All right.
That's correct.
All right. Then that answers my question.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you, Jackie and Mariah, for working on this project and bringing us the presentation. We'll talk about it again next week, and if we have any questions before or after that, we'll reach out and let you know.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for considering it.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it forth. Okay. So let's go from here. Let's go back to the top and work our way down. I don't think there's any further updates right now on the library construction project. We do have some closeout items to do there and to work on, so we can we'll look at getting those into a future agenda and start work on wrap up there as appropriate.
Right.
Same with the review of the FF&E. The remaining items we'll work on those and where we're at with those and the rest of the change orders. How about our IP mill hazardous materials cleanup project?
That got delayed over the last 2 weeks, so I'm going to be trying to reach out and get that up and running again. The governor's office on Friday issued more of a stay on construction work that originally had been somewhat exempted under the initial state of emergency. And so we received guidance over the weekend that now public projects are subject to this order. So I need to get a better understanding about whether or not we can actually move forward. We'll definitely get everybody under contract, but we may need to delay any active work at the site until the end of the state of the emergency, or until the governor's relaxed that portion of it. So I'll be working with Mass Development to see if we can get an extension on our timeline so that we don't have to run up against that clock. I think obviously the state of emergency gives us plenty of rationale for why that's necessary. Oh, you're muted again.
I'm on mute again. I just said, keep us posted if there's any roadblocks or challenges that you need help with in that, and keep us updated on how that's progressing.
Definitely.
Reuse of the former library building. There was no further questions around the IP mill, correct?
I had none.
I didn't have any.
Okay. So reuse of the former library building. I know generally was a feeling that our concerns about it being a quote unquote vacant building is probably slightly postponed right now with the current state of things, but we should still be working toward a plan on what we're going to do in the short and long run there. Did you guys spend some time thinking about what you think of the idea of maybe having public works there, at least in the short term, or any other temporary, short-term uses? Obviously, longer term is a bigger conversation.
I have no problems with them being in the short term. I'm just not sure that the building is feasible for the long term for public works. I guess if we were to head in that direction, I think we'd probably need a feasibility study to determine what needed to be done with the building to make it useful to work as a highway building per se.
Yeah, and I think we were hoping to incorporate that into the feasibility study for, the Public Works offices, knowing that we had that planned anyway. And so,
Right.
my hope is that we add that into the scope of areas and buildings to review, possible locations to review that will help us understand what that might take if that's a feasible option long-term.
Agreed.
In
Agreed.
terms of short-term, Brian, there's probably some things we need to do, hopefully minor things to make that happen. We should probably start putting together a list of what that may entail.
Yes, sir.
Once we have that, we can kind of figure out what a timeline might look like. Obviously, with everything else going on, it's probably a little longer than normal.
I agree.
Okay. In terms of the longer term, beyond just incorporating that into a feasibility study, when do you both want to start talking about what does the outlook look like for that building, plus the Pleasant Street School building, and what we want to do, kind of with the buildings, right? This is kind of that longer term conversation.
Conversation. That's a big conversation.
That is a big conversation.
I think anytime after the annual town meeting would be a good time to take it up and just sit down and hash it out. I think we have a general idea of what parties are interested. We have Recreation Commission that has some interest in all of this and the building itself, the library, and the superintendent's office has made it known to us that they're interested as well, which brings up some interesting topics as to, are they gonna fix it? Are we gonna fix it? Or, how's that gonna work?
Right.
And then we have highway as well. So I think first and foremost, I'd probably be more interested in taking care of our people first, as opposed to others. If there's not a viable way to use that building or any of those buildings, then we can move down the list and remove people or departments or agencies as we go along.
I agree.
The request I have for Brian and probably Mariah primarily, but take a look at finding a way to survey or kind of talk with RAC specifically and even also Union 28 or Superintendent's Office about what are their needs, right? Abstract of a building they're in today. What are their needs when they think about office space and other things, right? So they have some space in theory right now for programming, but is that really what they need or use? Or, is it more of they need, what is the right need as opposed to what they have today to help us direct that conversation? And I think the superintendent's office has already begun internal discussions a little bit. I think I saw something on a meeting in the past where they started talking about the need to evaluate what they're going to do and where that office is going to be long term.
Okay,
so
that's good.
But maybe working with both of them, and I think we're kind of doing that already with Public Works. So kind of pulling that all together to help guide that conversation when we pull the parties to the table and start talking about that after the annual.
Okay, works for me.
Excellent. Any questions, Brian? Is that clear, Brian, Mariah?
Yeah, I've already started talking to Recreation Commission, just kind of informally about, as they're thinking about parks, what their needs are in order to keep up with those parks. And so I think they'd be happy to sit down and have a bigger conversation about that.
Excellent. Thank you.
I was just going
Okay.
to add that Mariah had already started a similar survey for town hall space that I'm sure we can adapt for this need as well.
Excellent. Okay, moving on. Review of the highway superintendent position description. So we made some edit to the educational requirements for that position to match the new job title that we've given it. It's
So
loosely modeled on our.
everything is
Go
what
ahead.
you reviewed except what's in red. I did add what we already know to be true, but I think we should maybe start calling that out in some of these positions even clearer.
I think our current climate would indicate that that's a key word we use loosely, but we should probably really formalize it.
Agreed. So we had discussed, we had already amended all of the essential services or the essential functions in our past review of this. And we want to revisit this section of the job description. And so what is stricken is what was currently in the description from the last time this was updated. And as we talk, this is a very specific reference. You don't get a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. That's master's degree level work, so that's a weird phrasing. Also don't have an in-house engineering department. We outsource our engineering services, so that doesn't seem to be necessary. Instead, what we did is we kept everything that's in black here is what was already in the description. We could probably remove graders because we have no gravel roads in town and we don't use a grader, so we could probably strike that. But this language right here is consistent with the language that's in the wastewater and water superintendent's position. So it speaks to wanting to have a level of professional experience in a business type setting. So the ability to look at reports and to do the work communications and accounting and being able to supervise that type of thing. But equivalency with a journeyman's level trade knowledge and X amount of years of experience may also lend a candidate to that position as well. So it seemed appropriate to have this be consistent. I did review a few model job descriptions on the state level for this position, and it's not too different than this. The only difference I ever saw was when a department actually had an engineering department. It may make sense to have somebody with that background, but that's not what we have.
Brian, I can, if we had to quantify associate's degree, I don't think we'd have a problem. But the terminology journeyman, I don't know what journeyman means in the context that we're using it.
I'm trying to recall the last time we had this conversation is when we revised the last superintendent's position, and that was about 2 years ago. And I feel like this conversation came up then too. My understanding of that phrasing is to communicate a certain level of expertise that's developed with experience within the trade. Sometimes that comes with some professional certifications that are developed within the industry. But it's meant to be a little more broad because that can look a little bit different depending on the department. But if you think that language is not clear enough, we can definitely alter that.
Well, I don't, I'm, I don't want to play devil's advocate. I'm just trying to use language that everybody can wrap their head around, and it doesn't mean different things to different people.
I mean, my familiarity with it always goes to electrical when I hear those terms, but
Right.
I know they're also used in construction and labor, and there's a lot of trade fields, right? It's a common level of of reference, whether it's formalized or not, like an electrician with license. But I see what you mean. It could be considered slightly ambiguous. On the other hand, it could be considered, the general definition of someone who's an expert at their trade, right, as opposed to an apprentice, right? So I don't know. It's a fair question. I don't know what the right answer is. I think we need to somehow quantify trade knowledge as opposed to just college education for this sort of position. I think because it has, management and supervisory and all of those requirements, but I also think it has a level of hands-on that dictates that that's an important quality, right?
I agree.
So that was about zero of an answer to how to change that, but
Yeah. So it's just journeyman's level of trade knowledge.
I mean, I almost feel like that's described, right? What a journeyman level trade knowledge is almost described in the following sentences, but I don't know how we, I don't know if we should say, it differently or just take that part out.
Brian, can we have what the definition of a journeyman is?
Stand by.
I've got it pulled up.
That was impressive.
All right, you're up.
So according to Wikipedia, it is an employment in some building trades. They give examples of what those trades are, including electrician, carpenter, plumber, machinist, HVAC, etc., usually requiring a state or local license as a journeyman or master. That license certifies a craftsman has met requirements of time in the field, usually a minimum of 8,000 hours, and time in approved classroom setting, usually 700 hours. The journeyman has a responsibility of supervising workers of lesser experience and training them. And they are commonly expected to have a wide range of experience covering most of the fields of their trade.
So based on that definition from Wikipedia, it would appear that the journeyman definition met half of what we have in education and experience, and then one half of it doesn't meet, and that's expertise or certificate of training, at least that I know of. So I don't know, what do you guys think? Do you agree or disagree?
I don't know, Pete, do you have thoughts? I mean,
I mean, I see where what Bill's saying is it kind of makes it, it's like it's trying to focus it too in depth. I think I don't know, maybe a better way of wording that so it's more understandable.
I guess my thought is, I think Bill, your point was journeyman sounds ambiguous when it's not necessarily tied to a specific level of certification or title or not title, but level of education and work time that defines that title, if you will.
Right.
I looked at it a little differently. I took it as, it's, another take on the definition is, a short version is that, it's considered competent and authorized to work in the field as a fully qualified employee, versus an apprentice, kind of those general definitions. And so I took it more of a general definition of someone who's well qualified and then has these specific qualifications down below. And I guess my take was more of, even if you consider journeyman to be kind of ambiguous in that line, the qualifications that meet that are listed very specifically, or some of them criteria. So I think it would make it very easy to say someone has some of these or they don't, to say that they've kind of met that education experience. But I could go either way with it, I guess.
Yeah, I've never heard the word journeyman's tied to highway work.
I've heard it
I
tied to
could be
laborers, but not highway per se.
right. And like Bill had stated before, I've heard it tied to electricians, plumbers,
Well, yeah, and when you talk about those particular trades, there's levels that you have to, you attain level A. I'm being simplistic, but a level A, B, C, and D before you reach master or electrician or what have you. And I don't know how you do that in highway, but
Well,
it's not a. I bring it up because I think that's our job to try to make these things as correct as possible, and for in the future, and to be transparent, and in the future when other people look at this and read it, that they clearly understand what it meant. So I would be in favor of taking journeyman out and just quantifying the rest of the education experience by what the individual does, including certificates and licenses and things of that sort as well, in the description of education and an experience.
so
this section that's highlighted, remove this section that's highlighted.
Yes.
well, before you do that, I would think maybe we change it to associate's degree, and just drop the journeyman to knowledge and then say, or 3 to 5 years related work experience, right? Just take that
Yes.
that midsection out.
Yep.
I would, because the highway superintendent happens to be on the line, I think still if he would like to chime in or has an opinion, he's welcome to voice it, but that's not a requirement. But I just want to make it known that, the floor is open if you wish to join in. I think we can hear you.
You're unmuted if you want to be unmuted.
Well, be patient with me. This laptop has dropped out many times tonight, so I'm only catching bits and pieces of what's going on.
Well, we can hear you now. I had just, if you didn't hear my question, I had just said that, as we're reviewing this and talking about what to change that to, if you had an opinion or any input you wanted to share, you're welcome to. I mean, not a requirement, but definitely if you have a thought, we'd like to hear it.
Well, clearly, I am not college educated. I'm hands-on educated. So I think that should account for a lot. I think is huge.
I think one of the big discussion point at the moment was just how we were feeling that journeyman, as it relates to your profession, sounds a little ambiguous versus some of the other trades where it's a very distinct level of, licensing and time served. And I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
No, I can agree with that. I've heard it more so in the construction field, or building field than I have in, road work, or highway departments.
So I'm thinking, I think generally it sounds like it makes sense to change that, as we were just discussing, to associates or 3 to 5 years, and just drop the journeyman level of trade knowledge. I mean, and then I think as it goes on there, to specifically be talking about the areas of expertise that we'd want to see 3+ years of, right? That makes sense. I think that part all makes sense to me. So maybe that's the final edit that makes sense to bring this education to the right level. If you want to,
This
go ahead.
section right here would go. Okay.
That's what I'm thinking. In the and, so we'll just make it an or, right?
Okay.
Does the rest of the board agree with that?
I agree.
Yes, I agree with that. And if we need to expand a little bit more, if there's ways in which to do that, as far as skills and abilities that are needed, or specific duties that are performed, that I don't see anything in here about supervision.
It's in the next page at just after the 3 years there, the red.
Oh, okay. 3 years, okay, supervisory responsibilities, equivalent combination of education and training and experience, which provides the required knowledge, skills, and abilities for all essential functions of the job may be considered. Yeah, that seems fine for me. It works for me.
Do we need to put something about building maintenance in there, or anything around that side of it? I mean, we talked a bit about road and those things, but at least as the position is today, I'm sure it's
I
in the
believe it's
essential functions, but I don't know if it needs to be in the experience level, right?
It's definitely in the functions because I was working with
Number
Glenn.
9.
Thank you.
I saw.
I could get used to having this support team every meeting. It's really easy. They're like,
Here in the
"Which
background.
floor, which slide?"
Anticipating needs left and right.
Oh.
But yeah, we could add that into the education and experience section.
Yeah, I would actually like to see that in the education and experience section.
So we have to strike graders anyhow. So we can strike graders and add in building maintenance.
Yep.
Yeah, graders, I think, is in there more than once.
Okay, I will strike that and add building maintenance.
Right.
Are there additional changes that you want to see in this?
I think underneath knowledge, abilities, and skill, we got to strike out the knowledge of municipal water treatment operations.
Thought we did get that. Do we still have it in here?
Yes.
It's still in there.
So we had working knowledge of building maintenance. Oh, knowledge of municipal water treatment operations. Strike.
And the graders is in the next, and the abilities, the first line of abilities there, that's where the next graders is.
Right.
That first sentence.
There we go.
As we're talking back in that experience, we mentioned building maintenance. Maybe it makes sense to just expand that to fit the things that we have that role managed today. And so maybe it's building and grounds maintenance and custodial services. Maybe find a way to incorporate those kind of key areas of management responsibility and or, just to say that you're really familiar with the way those operate, at least at a supervisory level.
Yes.
Right. So add that back up into this category, as well as making sure it's clear here.
I'm not sure where this is.
So up here, we talked about
yes.
adding
Yep.
in building maintenance.
Yeah.
And then down here in the knowledge section, we already have working knowledge of building maintenance and repair techniques practices. We can add another semicolon here about the supervising of ground maintenance and the supervising of custodial services.
Yeah, I think knowledge of and or, right? I mean, I think knowledge of is fine because, you at least have to have some knowledge to manage it.
Yep.
But yes, I think up above that in the educational requirement as well around, or experience around, kind of the greater section there.
We'll put it
Yeah.
in both sections. Okay. All right, I'll make those adjustments. Any other adjustments you want to see?
No, that's
I
it
think
for me.
that's it.
Yep.
All right, we'll look at a clean copy next week and then hopefully we'll finalize it.
Copy on April 6th. Okay, you got it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep. All right.
All right, review of the complete streets prioritization plan.
There have been some changes made to this since the last time you guys saw it. I met with FERCog last week, and almost everything is the same except for 3 of the line items. 2 of the line items I think got moved around. And those were related to Route 2 projects, which the folks at FERCog had put those at the bottom since we're not really in control of them. They thought that they just put them there kind of as placeholders at the bottom. And we talked about it, and while I understand why they had done that, since they're not really in our jurisdiction, I think that we should have them placed on here as a priority, because I know that in the discussions that I've had with folks throughout town, they really are a high priority to us. And whether or not we are in total control over doing those projects, they agreed that we could move them higher up to really portray that. And Brian, it looks like you have an old copy here.
Yeah, so I've got what was items 22 and 23. Are those the 2 projects you're talking about?
Yeah, can you pull up? I had sent you a new one on Friday. Or if you can't get it, then I can pull it up.
While you're pulling that up, you can continue without me. I should have to step away for just a moment, but go ahead.
I just sent it to you again.
Thank you.
Or it will be sending as, well, 3, 2, 1, go.
There we go.
So if you scroll down to the bottom of that first page, so you can see that it was 3 of them. So number 1 is Irving Center pedestrian safety. I know that while I was in meetings for the Irving Center redevelopment or revisioning, this was the number 1 thing that came up. And I do think that it's at our top priority. Part of this is going to be when we're talking with DOT, being able to say that it is the top of our prioritization list is just another thing to back up any asks that we have from them. And then you'll see number 4 is the Farley Ledges pedestrian safety. We moved that up, as well as number 5 being the Irving Center curb ramp improvements, which are on side streets adjacent to Route 2.
And then everything else remained in its original order, right?
True, yes, that's correct. And nothing has been added, I don't think. It was just moved around.
So in
Right.
terms
I
of,
agree. I think it's imperative that in this document that we clearly indicate the issues and problems that exist in section 1 and in section 4 of Route 2, even though it's Mass DOT that needs to correct and fix the deficiencies to Route 2. But to ignore it, it does a disservice to really what needs to be done for public safety and for the individuals in those areas, as well as the traffic moving up and down through Folly Ledges during the peak times when people are trying to walk up and down Route 2 with full packs on and trying to cross the roads and highway and going up to the ledges creates a real problem.
I'd like to be able to show our business owners in Irving Center as well that we're taking the concerns that they've been voicing very seriously, especially as we have one empty storefront and one store on the market. I think being able to talk to potential buyers for those spaces, saying, you know, we understand some of your concerns about being located on Route 2. Here's what we're doing to prioritize changes.
Agreed.
yeah, I agree. In terms of, you know, steps and actions that we need to take around this, beyond keeping it, you know, a current document and probably reviewing it on some regular frequency to make sure it stays in the forefront, is there any specific actions that we're expected to do with regards to the plan?
Brian, are you familiar with the grant requirements?
Yes. I need, if you're willing to approve, again, the only changes were the 3 that Mariah noted. Otherwise, this is exactly the same list of priorities that Glenn, Mariah, and I reviewed with the staff at FERCog a month ago, and that the staff, both Beth and Lori, presented to you last week. If you're willing to endorse this, I would ask you to take a vote tonight to approve us to submit this to MassDOT for adoption. And we will submit it tomorrow and get it to them so that we will be at least in the consideration for implementation funding. And we're hoping to use that to start with our priority projects. We may not be able to get funding for project 1 because it's not under our control. We're going to use project 1 as our priority 1 as a tool to communicate to the MassDOT District 2 office the priority. But we would likely start with priority 2 and work on River, Warner, Strachan Street, and be able to apply for some of that complete streets funding for the rest of our project that we're working on there.
Yeah, and just to be clear, just because we move these up, we don't have to go in order when it comes to this list. We can determine our priorities, but then when it comes to actually funding and completing projects, we don't have to go down the list in order.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns? Do we feel ready to adopt as shown?
I'm ready to adopt.
I'm fine with it. I'm good to adopt it.
Okay. Well, then I'll make a motion that we approve the Complete Streets Program Project Prioritization Plan and submit it to Mass DOT.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so Mariah and I will work with FERCog tomorrow to get this submitted to MassDOT.
Excellent. Feels like such a small motion for what was a lot of work.
Thank you all for looking it over.
You're welcome.
Yes, thanks for all the work, and it'll be
Good job.
exciting to see some of these projects come together too.
There's that one. What's
Our
next?
next item is what's that, Brian?
I'm trying to remind myself where we are next.
Surplus equipment request from police department.
You probably don't need it in that size font, do you? There we go.
Good.
So he has some surplus equipment. It's a single cell prisoner partition that does not fit in our new vehicle. So he's looking to surplus it and put it on municipal bid. And if that is unsuccessful, then he would scrap it. Any concerns?
No concern.
All right, make a motion that we surplus the Satina single cell prisoner partition and associated items.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
And we have annual nomination of the inspector of animals. So
They make
Arthur
us
Johnson
every
has,
year before April 1st.
I'm sorry?
They make us do this every year before April 1st.
Right, and so it has consistently for a few years been Arthur Johnson. Any concerns with renominating him?
No
I
concern.
have no concerns.
My understanding is he's still interested in continuing in that capacity.
That is my understanding.
So I'll make a motion that we nominate Arthur Johnson as the inspector of animals for the town of Irving.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Then we have a full-time officer training waiver petition request. Brian, do you need a signature on that, by the way, or on the nomination?
For the inspector of animals,
Correct.
no, I need your vote, and then this section is where the
He accepts. Yep,
accepts.
understood.
So I will work with the inspector of animals for that. I will, if you decide to approve this petition, I will need the three of you to sign this.
Okay. So Chief Blair and you are requesting approval for petition to the Mass Municipal Police Training Committee for a 270-day waiver for Officer Moran. And at this stage, it's based on the timing for the next academy class, correct?
We believe that there's another academy that will be scheduled for the fall. Obviously, with everything going on, everything is in flux. So the chief is actively watching that, and as soon as we are made aware of the next one, we will be working with Officer Moran to prepare his application materials. My understanding is that officers with an approved waiver in the queue may receive priority consideration over applicants that do not.
And this waiver, if we approve the request and it was granted, would allow him to work in a full-time capacity until that time,
Correct.
up to 270 days.
Correct.
I don't have any concerns. We knew that we would need to head this route with him, so.
No concerns.
Okay. Then I'll make a motion that we approve the submittal of the petition to the Mass Municipal Police Training Committee for a 270-day waiver for Officer Matthew Moran.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're going to pass over meeting minutes. We will have those in a future meeting. And I believe the last item, circling back, was a water commitment.
Yes, you should have a 10th water commitment.
10th water commitment for FY 2020. So in the amount of $93.76 for final charges at 29 Forest Street.
Second.
Somebody else want to make a motion tonight?
Motion? I thought there was a motion.
I guess I'll make a motion that we approve the 10th water commitment for FY 20 in the amount of $93.76.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, any other items? Did I miss anything? I jumped around a little bit, but I think we covered them all.
I think you got them all.
Everything I've got, except we need to have a conversation about, if you're willing to, cemetery.
Ah, yes, on unforeseen business.
Right.
I don't have that pulled up. Do you, Brian, just to kind of fill the board in on the request? You don't have to present it necessarily, but just to talk us through what the concern is.
Yeah, I can definitely explain it, and then Glenn is still on the call, so if I start to screw it up, he can jump in and help me out here. So you have the regulations for the cemetery state that the cemetery is closed until April 15th, and that or until the end of mud season, and that the Board of Selectmen is the board that can change and allow a deviation from that schedule. Recently been informed that an individual who has a lot in the cemetery is under hospice care. And the religious beliefs of this individual requires burial as close to 24 hours after death as possible. So we don't know exactly when this will all happen. We have a moist situation up there right now, so it's hard for any of our large equipment to operate in the cemetery right now, so this will likely have to be hand dug. We also are under a state of emergency with the governor ordering that no gatherings of more than 10 people are allowed. So we have a lot of constraints and a lot of things to consider. But at the same point, we want to do what the town can to respect the religious beliefs of an individual. And so we're looking to guidance from the board on how to proceed. And like I said, Glenn is here if he would like to speak at all.
Yeah, so I saw the email from council also. Did you get to see it?
Yes.
Okay, so a lot of the concerns that I'd had about the preparation for, I don't really anymore because of the liner issue. I did put an email back to the chapel that would be taking care of this and have not had a response back to make sure that the family is okay with what I had found. But yes, if this was to happen the next week, we would have to do this all by hand, which is not a concern.
Okay, so you're comfortable we could maintain social distancing and all of our procedures and everything and still meet this request?
Yes, it would certainly take a lot longer than the way that we typically do one if we have to dig it by hand. But yes, we could get it done with still maintaining the social distance.
Obviously, we need to advise the family. I mean, the gathering restrictions still apply from what I understood from council's response, so that the 10 or less applies even to a funeral, correct?
Correct. Now, is it okay if I forward the council's response to the chapel that I'm working with?
Of course.
Okay.
I think at the end of the day, the family has to make a decision that's right for them, just like the town's attempting to make a decision that's right for all parties. If they can live with the fact that we're operating under the state of emergency and the town's doing what it can to comply with their wishes and the state of emergency declaration, hopefully they're amenable to that. But if ultimately they need to wait until they can have a larger gathering, we just can't, we'll have to delay it, and we can't guarantee when this order will be lifted. And it's that's beyond our control.
Correct.
Agreed. What's the board's thoughts about making this accommodation? I mean, I think it's reasonable that we can do it safely, even in the midst of the current situation. We just have to obviously advise the chapel and the family of the restrictions that the state of emergency has, over the proceeding.
I agree.
Yeah, I feel comfortable with the highway doing the job by hand if need be, and as Glenn stated, highway boss stated that they're quite capable of doing that. So I'm fine with that, and hopefully the family can honor the restrictions that the state has put on gatherings of people of a certain limit. We're faced with the same thing. My wife's mom passed away, and we can't do anything until the ground breaks and is not as wet and muddy. And so we have family that's going to come in at a time that's appropriate for people to go through the woods and to a distant remote area without vehicles being needed to be pulled out, or walking through mud and what have you. So I think the family, as long as they understand the reasoning, hopefully they'll abide by that.
I agree. You need us to formalize that accommodation, Brian?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I'll make a motion that we make an accommodation for the requesting party should they have a need, inside of the restricted time, as long as they follow the guidelines outlined by council.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Any further business for this evening?
That's all I had for you.
All right, well, with nothing further, we will close the meeting. So make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Gentlemen, after we close the broadcast, if you have a few minutes and want to stay on, I can walk through electronic signing of documents if you have time, or we can schedule another time this week, whichever you prefer.
I could hang in.
I can hang in.
Okay. Can we stay on, Brian, after it stops, or do we need to do a different meeting?
I was gonna say, I think once we end the broadcast, it starts its processing. So I think it kicks out and it will start the video download.
Okay, I will start a Teams meeting and invite you guys in a few minutes if that works.
Okay.
We'll try it.
All right. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, all attendees, for joining us, and we'll be back next week.
Thank you all.
Have a good evening.
All right. Good night.
Mm-hmm.